it's not true. Say it's just a story.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a new episode of Chatting with Lady Scene. Hello Mum, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, honey. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Oh, good, good. Well, I suppose before we start with the questions, can we show everybody Mickey's other collar? That wonderful collar that...
Oh. I would lift her up maybe a bit about there.
How's that?
I think they would see it.
I had actually said in the video where her sapphire collar was shown that the other collar was rubies. In fact, as we can see, it's not rubies, it's diamonds in quotes. So I'm afraid one does slip up occasionally. You know, I've slipped up with that. Don't ask me where I got that it was rubies from. I suppose, you know, when you have so many balls in the air, every now and then one falls. It's like the other day in one of the videos, I switched metaphors in midstream, which of course you're never supposed to do. And I ended up saying that Hercules rolled the boulder up. But in fact, of course, as everybody knows, it's Sisyphus. So I suppose there's no doubt about it. I'm imperfect. But isn't Mickey's collar perfect?
Yes, it's very pretty.
Very glam, isn't it? So, would you like to hit me with a question, honey?
All right, so we're going to start off with today's questions. Do you know Robert Lacey, the author of the new book about William and Harry? And if so, what can you tell us that will place the revelations in context?
I do know Robert Lacey. I've known Robert Lacey for many years, and you may not remember him, but you know Robert Lacey, or you used to know Robert Lacey, because when we lived at Bourne Street, Robert and his first wife, Sandy, used to live at South Eaton Place. And do you remember the market in Mozart Square at the foot of the Bourne Street with Ebury Street?
Yes, I remember that little market, yes.
Well, they often were at it, as was everybody in Belgravia. And I've sort of known Robert peripherally for many, many years. And I have a great deal of respect for him as a writer and as a person. I've only met Jane Rayne once or twice. She is a great friend of one of Dima's godmothers, who sings her praises to the skies and always has. I mean, I'm speaking about going back 40 years. And Robert is now married to, she was Lady Jane Rayne Tempest Stewart, the Marquis of Londonderry's daughter. Her brother Alistair was the late Marquis. Her sister is Lady Annabel Goldsmith. And Jane was one of the girls who held, she was one of the coronation maidens. I think there were 6 of them. I don't remember exactly how many now, but she was one of them. And so she's from a very eminent family, and she and Robert are now married. She was married to Sir Max Rayne, who was a very rich Jewish industrialist, I think, who became a lord. So she was first of all Lady Jane Rayne, then she was Lady Rayne, and she's now really Lady Jane Lacey. But I think she calls herself Lady Jane Rayne Lacey, because she's really very well known as Lady Jane Rayne. And she's impeccably connected but there's a huge backstory here. Robert and through Annabel and Jane, but really mostly Annabel, Robert has a very interesting take on things that I do not completely agree with. In fact, I do not agree with an awful lot of the conclusions that Robert comes up with. And Robert is also one of the advisors on the crown. And I question how somebody who is a serious biographer can actually be an advisor on a work of fiction that to a large extent presents itself as fact. The gist of Robert's book is basically that William and Harry, their fallout is major, which I know it to be, as we all know it to be, and that I think she wants to go. Go girl. That it's major. He does rather more of the bleeding heart routine than I am comfortable with. But I know where it's coming from. Because you see, what the public doesn't know is that Diana Spencer was rumoured to be Jimmy Goldsmith's daughter. And Annabel Goldsmith loves being mother hen, an earth mother, gathering all her chicks and any chick related or connected to her. And I'm not criticising this because it's very commendable. I mean, I hasten to add, I don't really know Annabel Goldsmith. I've met her a few times, but I don't really know her. The first time I met her was when she and Jimmy Goldsmith showed up at the Libyan ambassador's dinner, which I organised on the 29th of September in 1977. It was the most expensive diplomatic reception that has ever been held in the history of civilization. The party favours alone from Givenchy were £250,000 according to the press, and I'm not allowed to say exactly how much they were, but believe me, everything was and everybody knew that it was going to be this most phantasmagorical occasion, and people were beating down the doors to get invitations. Well, Annabel and Jimmy were there. The Londonderrys have been very well connected, but they are a family that has fallen upon hard times. A century ago, they were tremendously rich and tremendously influential. Londonderry House was one of the great London residences and a hive of political activity. Then that's Annabel's grandparents and Jane's grandparents and Alistair's grandparents. Then their parents inherited, and they got rid of Londonderry House. They had to get rid of it. And Alistair had to sell their stately home. And that's always a bad sign when a family sells its stately home. It really means they're on their uppers. I sort of know an awful lot about them because of various connections of mine, not only the ones I've mentioned so far, but Alan Sivwright, who was a famous opera impresario, he's dead now. He was a great, great friend of mine. He was a great friend of Shaquille and Martin's as well. That's how we became such good friends, because of their friendship with Alan. I used to see Alistair and his second wife, Doreen. She was Doreen Wells, a famous ballet dancer, at Alan's all the time. But it's a family that's very grand, but has fallen upon hardish times. but both girls married rich. Well, Annabel didn't really marry rich with her first husband, who was Mark Burley, who named Annabel's in honour of her. But he ended up becoming rich. His father was a famous portrait painter called Sir Oswald Burley. That picture in the family dining room above the sideboard, that's an Oswald Burley. And then she left him and married, well, she was flagrantly his mistress for years before she left Mark and married him, Jimmy Goldsmith, who was tremendously rich. And they had 3 illegitimate children together before getting married. One of whom is Jemima Khan, who married the present Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, and their 2 sons, Zach, who ran for Mayor of London and lost to Sadiq Khan, and Ben, and they're very well connected. Annabel used to be a great friend of Diana, Princess of Wales. I'm not saying that she dined out on the fact that Diana was supposed to be her husband's child, but let me put it this way. It was a very well-known gossip, and it was certainly never concealed in those circles. She also, though in favour of her, embraced her niece, Lady Cosima Somerset, who was ostensibly her brother Alistair's daughter, but it emerged years later that Cosima claimed that she was actually robbing Douglas Hume, the pianist who committed suicide. He had an affair with Princess Margaret and committed suicide, and who was married to Sandra Paul, the famous model who's now Lady Howard. Her husband, Michael, was the head of the Conservative Party, and her son with Robin, Sholto, is an old chum of mine, going back nearly 40 years. And I haven't seen him for ages, but we both used to be very chummy. We worked on the same magazine together, and he's a really great guy, Sholto. So there are all sorts of links, let's put it that way. So I know I get the picture, the behind the scenes picture. And the Ham House take, which is Annabel's house, the Ham House take on the Wales marriage has always been very prejudiced in favour of Diana. Poor Diana. Diana this, Diana that, flying in the face of all of the evidence to the contrary. Because, of course, there are all of these links that are possible links, and that are familial or emotional, and that have always overridden the realities. And I hate to say that Robert has become very influenced since he married Jane. Well, in fact, before he married Jane, when they were together before they got married. Having said that, he's a good writer. He's written many, many very successful books. There is no doubt that he's onto something about William and Harry's tremendous falling out. I agree with him that a lot of it has to do with the fact that Harry is the second son, and that William, being the heir to the throne, is has taken a very serious, dutiful line. I do not agree with some of his take, which appears to be that, cut them a lot of slack and let them behave badly. No, no, no. I'm awfully sorry. You don't cut people a lot of slack for them to behave badly. The fact that Harry's never going to accede to the throne, barring a great catastrophe, doesn't alter the fact that he has responsibilities. And this sort of, mother hen, because Annabel always also was rather sort of without being hippie-ish, was very much sort of above it all, and, and which Jane never was, but Annabel was. And she's definitely coloured the atmosphere of the whole of her sector, let's put it that way, because she takes no prisoners if you don't agree with her and you don't like, if she doesn't, if you don't like what she's about. My understanding is that she's quite prepared to exclude you from her magical circle. So I think Robert is a little bit too lenient, and he leans a little bit too much on the excuse for bad behavior. But having said that, I will agree with one point that he makes, which is that the only people who marry into the royal family successfully are those who marry into the royal family with the intention of serving the royal family. He doesn't quite put it like that, but that's basically what he's saying, and I agree with that. He slightly makes the point, and then excuses it, that those who enter the royal family, like Diana and Meghan, intending to exploit it to their advantage, come a cropper. But having made the point, he then tries to excuse it. And I'm sorry, I don't think there's any excuse for it. You do not, for instance, you do not marry into a royal family and then decide you're going to treat it as if it's a candy jar. Or, you do not, if you're a doctor, decide you're going to aim to be head of brain surgery, and once you are, you decide, I'm going to be dispensing crank medicine instead of doing brain surgery. That's my take on the book so far. Doubtless I will be asked other questions, and I will have more to offer down the line. Was that interesting?
Yes, it was.
It was.
It gets to the point.
You won't remember it, but I took you children to a book launch that Robert had at Elizabeth Street. And you have a book that he wrote, that he inscribed to you kids, somewhere in one of the libraries, in one of the houses. Okay. So anyway, he's a nice man. And I would recommend buying the book. I'm sure it's going to be I'm sure it's worth reading, even though, as I said, I definitely cannot agree with everything, because I know what Robert's stances are, and I know where they come from, and I don't agree with some of them.
Okay. So for our next question today, you mentioned Delphine Boel in an earlier episode. Are you pleased that the Belgian court has ruled that she is now officially a Belgian princess? Do you know why the Belgian king left it up to a court to deal with the matter?
Well, I surmise that why King Philippe did not want to intervene was that he has a loyalty to his mother, Queen Paula, and had he intervened, it might have caused a friction within his immediate family with his parents. The court has decreed that she is a princess of Saxe-Coburg Gotha, which is the royal house of the Belgians, and she is a princess of Belgium. Her children, according to her lawyer, are also now of princely rank. So I think that's absolutely glorious where she's concerned. I mean, I don't really know her well. I've met her a few times. I've been to parties that she's had. And she's a nice person. And, you know, I think what was done to her was extremely humiliating and completely unacceptable. And had it not been done, she wouldn't have been humiliated. She wouldn't have fought for her corner. And she would not now be a declared Princess of Belgium. So it's a really instructive lesson in the fact that there are times in life when it suits you to stand up for your rights, it suits you to stand up for what you believe to be right. Don't allow yourself to be intimidated. Do not accept bad treatment, which is what she was getting from the former king, King Albert, her father. And now she's Princess Delphine of Belgium. I think wonderful for her. Good gracious. Great. I think it's wonderful. Which slightly touches upon a question that we have been asked about the picture that was in the video that we did quite recently in Queen Victoria's boudoir. The picture is a sketch by Sir Thomas Lawrence for a portrait he did of Queen Victoria's mother. She was Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg, Saalfeld. Her brother, Leopold, married Queen Victoria's first cousin, Princess Charlotte of Wales, whose father was King George IV. And Princess Charlotte died in childbirth, which was a complete disaster for the nation, because I think she died at 17, and she was the only legitimate heir to the throne of England in the immediate dynasty. All George III's sons, so that's George IV's brothers, had a plenitude of illegitimate children, with not one of them having a legitimate child. So there was a mad scramble for all of these middle-aged men to marry, have wives, and breed. His brother, the Duke of Clarence, who became King William IV, married Queen Adelaide, who was the godmother of Clem Somerset, who owned this place, many times great-grandmother, whose name was Adelaide Somerset, named after her godmother, Queen Adelaide. And and I'm just trying to get it straight because it's quite complicated. Queen Victoria's mother was a widow. She married the Prince of Leiningen, who, ironically enough, I slightly know her many times great-grandson, Herman zu Leiningen, who works for the Royal Bank of Canada, sometimes in Cayman, sometimes in London, sometimes in Canada. Charming man, absolutely delightful. And he's great friends of mine at the bank. Queen Victoria's father, Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, married the widowed Princess of Leiningen, Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg, Saalfeld. And they produced Princess Victoria, who then became heir in line to the throne. Actually, heiress in line to the throne, to be completely correct. And because Queen Victoria used to stay here, and because this castle was owned by her equerry, who used to have to give up his quarters for her, and because we now have rooms that are called Queen Victoria's rooms, in that room, whenever I run across something that is linked to Queen Victoria that I think will look good in that room, I acquire it. So I bought that sketch of Queen Victoria's mother. Queen Victoria's mother really had a very sad life. She was widowed twice. Queen Victoria was only a year old when her father died. And Queen Victoria's mother fell under the influence of her husband's controller, Sir John Conroy, who really controlled her life. Some people think they were lovers. I'm not so sure. But it caused a tremendous amount of bitterness, and Queen Victoria couldn't wait to escape. Queen Victoria also was slightly emotionally unstable. Her father was reasonably stable, but her grandfather, King George III, was, as everybody knows, suffered bouts of insanity. And Queen Victoria was extremely emotional, extremely hysterical, somewhat irrational and illogical at times. And people used to say, she's like her grandfather. And she was one of those people, so it runs in families, who was a great believer in false memories. She decided that she'd had a terrible life and her mother didn't love her, which was completely untrue, and there was absolutely no evidence of it, and she had not felt like this when she was younger. But as soon as she got married and had an emotional attachment to Prince Albert, she completely turned on her mother, and for the rest of her mother's life, virtually belittled, embarrassed, humiliated, and treated her badly. I mean, it was really, her treatment of her mother was appalling. Her mother, by all accounts, was actually a very good, decent, and fine woman. And when this picture came up for sale, I thought, it's perfect. Because, in that room I have Queen Victoria, I have Prince Albert, and I have a sketch of their many times great-grandson, the Duke of Edinburgh, in his coronation robes. So now I have another sketch of his many times great-grandmother, the late Duchess of Kent. So that's it. That's the answer to the question. So I hope that was interesting to some people. I'm sure it was not very interesting to others, but there we go. Can't please everybody all the time. You know the picture I'm speaking of,
Yes, I do.
you?
Yes, yes.
Don't you think it's a pretty picture?
They are very good.
It is a pretty picture. I mean, it's just a nice little sketch. It's not of any great significance, but it is pretty. So thank you very much for listening. Do keep the questions coming in. And I hope you find the next video interesting, which is going to dish a little bit of dirt.
Well, thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you and goodbye.